Hello and welcome to our 6th episode of the unofficial SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is August 21st, and typically I'm here with Robert and Goran to talk about anything related to SAP on Azure. Unfortunately, today Goran is on a well-deserved vacation and Robert is out sick. So instead of skipping this session, we thought about making at least a quick one this time. And since I have a very special guest today again, I'm really looking forward to this video. So before we go actually over to Tobias, and Tobias can introduce himself later then and talk about the SAP Monitor for Azure, I quickly want to highlight a few other topics. So I want to start with João Couto, who will talk about Microsoft's investments in our partners. Then we want to talk about some of the resources available for partners, so how to get started or what resources are there to get to an Azure subscription, stuff like that. Then we quickly want to highlight 2 blog posts that have recently been published, one about XSUAA on the SAP Cloud Platform Cloud Foundry environment, and another blog about high availability on Azure. And then the last thing that we quickly want to talk about is the Devtoberfest that was just announced by SAP, I think, today. So welcome, Tobias, in a smaller round today.
Yep.
Great to have you here.
Thank you.
Cool. So before we go to your topic, like I said, let me quickly share my screen, and I want to share a few blog posts that were just released in this week. So João just released or published a blog about the continuing investment of partners in the SAP on Azure sphere. So I think actually when we look at SAP on Azure, looking at the partners is something extremely critical, extremely important to us right now. So obviously from the Microsoft side, we provide you with the infrastructure, we provide you with documentations, how to get started. We have some cool tools like the monitor that we'll drill down today. But I think what is really important is our collaboration with the partners, because in most cases we see the partners doing the implementations with the customer, doing the migrations from the SAP system on-prem into Azure to operate, to manage the landscapes on the customer's environment. So it's really something where partners play a very, very important role.
So who are those partners, Holger? Are those more like the implementation partners, the SIs, or independent developers, or could it be anyone?
Yeah, we see this across the board. So we have global SIs, obviously the well-known global partners. We have very small local partners, and we have partners that really focus on developing software that other partners can use. We have partners that really concentrate on the implementations. And I think that's really the beautiful thing, that we have a huge ecosystem of these SAP partners. And whether you are a customer that is looking for a huge SAP implementation project, or whether you are a partner or a customer that only needs help in a certain area, we really have a lot of certified partners that allow you to, or that help you running your SAP systems on Azure.
I see. Cool.
We even have now some cool certifications and skilling initiatives in place. So I think some of you know the AZ 120 course, where you can now get a certificate also that you are familiar with SAP on Azure. And obviously there are a few other things how we recognize and see how partners are good in a certain area, how they are familiar and have some knowledge about running SAP on Azure. So this is just a blog that was just, I think, published yesterday or something like that. And for quite some time now, we had in our backlog, something where we wanted to take a look at, well, how can you actually use Azure as a partner? How can you use Office 365? How can you get started to develop something and then obviously also bring it to your customers? And one of the interesting things that I really, really love about this whole partner network, Microsoft Partner Network, is an offering that we have for our partners called the Microsoft Action Packs. With this Microsoft Action Pack, it's extremely, from my point of view, extremely easy and attractive and cheap to get quite a big list of software components that you can use to run it in your environment, to test with it. So let me actually quickly open up this this Action Pack document here. It's fairly cheap. I think it's like, I don't know, 500 euros or something like that a year. But for example, you get a credit of monthly $100 US that you can use. You get Azure Active Directory for some users. You get certain software components here. You get Office 365. You get Dynamics. You get there's the Office 365 E3. So you get a really good package of licenses that you can use to develop applications, to test out new things, to check out new functionalities on Azure that you then obviously can also help position with your customers.
So it pays for itself, basically. You actually get money back.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And that's really the thing. I mean, we got a lot of questions. What's a good way to get started with Azure? And obviously there's the Azure free trial available. There are some packages, part of the Visual Studio subscription that you have. But especially if you're a partner, then I think it's, especially maybe if you're a smaller partner, this is a really fantastic thing to get a lot of back for just subscribing to this Microsoft Action Pack subscription.
Good stuff. Yeah.
Good. So that's just about the partner stuff that I quickly wanted to mention. Now, quickly talking about two blogs that I thought were really, really interesting, and mostly because I have been struggling, or I am struggling with the whole concept there quite a bit. So if you are familiar with the SAP Cloud Platform, then you most likely know the Cloud Foundry environment. Just a recap or a reminder from last week. So the Neo trial environment will be shut down. So you have to use Cloud Foundry going forwards anyways. But when it comes to the whole authentication, there's this XSUAA, the extended service for UAA that is available on Cloud Foundry. And if you get started with this, if you start to look at authentication, how can you protect your applications, how do you work with roles and with the different scopes, this can be quite confusing. And what I really loved about Jeffrey's blog here is he's apparently from SAP IT, and he's in a team that trains other colleagues within SAP. So it looks like also within SAP, using XSUAA is not straightforward. So it's good to have additional trainings available. And what Jeffrey does in this blog, he basically outlines some of the things that he's doing for these trainings. So it's a fairly long blog. There's really, right here, it's a 20 minutes read. But I love the structure, how he explains the different topics, how he also has a lot of references, a lot of links to official documentations, how he starts talking about UAA, then going to XSUAA, explaining how this relates to other identity providers that are connected and so on, how to work with roles, how to work with JOT tokens at the bottom or something like that. So it's really a very extensive blog. I have to admit, I have not spent more than 20 minutes on it, but I think there's really a lot of valuable content in there. So I thought it would be nice to put some spotlight.
It's the missing manual for the XSA administrator, basically. Whenever you deal with user administration or authentication in XSA, right? This is the missing manual, it looks like.
Yeah, I agree. So I I would only just recommend take a look at this. Maybe you find something helpful in this one. Another hopefully helpful block or documentation. Remember in the last few episodes we talked about high availability blogs that were published on the SAP Community Network, on the tech community in Microsoft. But now we just released also officially on docs.microsoft.com a new document that talks about high availability for SAP-HANA scale-up with Azure NetApp Files. So I think Goran had mentioned this in one of the last sessions, that all the blogs are nice, but this is the official documentation. So now I think Ralitza from the core engineering team has worked on this blog here, or on this documentation. And yeah, there are a lot of links, there are a lot of information there, but then also really a step-by-step guide, basically, that helps you to get started and build up this infrastructure. So if you are looking into using Azure NetApp Files and HA setup with HANA, then definitely check out this blog here.
The one thing I want to note here is that, I mean, it's great that Ralitza and the team put that together, and that has been long overdue, I think, and very much requested by many customers. The step-by-step instructions, how do I set that up if I don't want to have a storage cluster based on DRBD, setting up my NFS cluster myself. We are actually investing, and this is not my topic today, but we are actually investing in automation of the deployment of such landscapes. So instead of going through each step manual, right, eventually we have opportunities, and this could be a great topic for another episode here. We have invested in tools that will allow you to literally deploy an entire SAP landscape, not just HANA and not just this little aspect of it, with the push of a button. Just wanted to mention it, and not to discount the great work that has been done. It's great that this exists, but if you find these steps too tedious and you want to replicate it or to multiply it into other landscapes, this may be worthwhile looking into.
Yeah, and for me, this is a coexistence, right? On the one hand, I want to have these automation tools that really help me to, like I said, with the click of a button, I have my SAP system up and running. But on the other hand, I maybe also want to know what's actually happening in these automation scripts. And I want to get to see, well, what are the individual steps, and documents like this obviously help there a lot.
Good stuff.
Good. So before we hand over to you, Tobias, I quickly want to highlight one other thing. And oops, there is, wait, this was the wrong button. There's an announcement just happening, just yesterday about a Devtoberfest. So Thomas Young and the developer community at SAP, they announced a Devtoberfest, which is supposed to happen here. The event will launch on August 24th, and it will run for 8 weeks with free technical training, online sessions, and so on. So it sounds like a really, really cool event. Actually, there is a GitHub repository already live with additional information, and one of the things where you can already see all the effort and all the work that has been already going into this Devtoberfest is, if you look at here these enablement topics, then you can see some main topics like the SAP Cloud Platform Workflow, ABAP HTTP connectivity, the Business Application Studio, the Kyma runtime, and the Cloud Application Programming Model, SAP HANA multi-model. So there are quite a few, and Google Chrome extensions. So there are quite a few topics. And if you actually, for example, look at the workflow from DJ, you can already see, again, all the amount of work that is going in there. So if you scroll down here, there's a very comprehensive guide what will happen. So starting Monday on August 24th, we'll have the first videos that talk about setting up workflow, deploying the workflow, and so on. So it's a really, I don't know yet, but it sounds like a really interesting event from SAP, from the development teams there at SAP. So I'm really looking forward to this one. I think this can be quite exciting.
It's like an 8-week hackathon, basically, or code jam, I think it used to be called in the context of TechEd, which I guess we'll do without this year, or only virtually.
Yeah. So I think hackathon is a good topic, because it's not only about this technical enablement that I just showed you, but the idea then is really to come up with your own problems, basically. So the idea is first they explain some of the topics, but then the idea is that you build something there, that you come up with some new workflow services, or maybe you have some cool ideas how to enhance schema, or use the Business Application Studio to enhance this one. So I think the idea is really to engage with the community and to encourage everyone to participate, to maybe work with other teams. I'm not sure if there's actually if you are allowed to. I guess you are allowed to collaborate and work together on certain topics, and to really push some of these topics forward. So I think this can be a really interesting initiative, and especially like you just said, especially since there is no way now that we have a good in-person TechEd experience. So now it's 2 days virtually. So maybe this is a beautiful addition to what was TechEd.
Are there good prices? Any good swag?
I don't know, actually. Let me see if there are prices.
Yeah.
There's only pricing. Wait, maybe there was some. Maybe the price is that your code will be part of the SAP community. Well, no, there is a judge, so apparently there is something.
Yeah, some prizes. Yeah, I mean, if there's no TechEd, you know, where do people get the swag from, right?
You need at least some stickers, yes.
Stickers, pencils, right, or the drones. I was always shooting for the drone, but
but you never got it.
I never got it. Yeah, all these years.
Yeah, well, maybe next year then.
Maybe next year. Yeah.
Good. So with the Devtoberfest, let me actually switch over to you. So I think a few weeks ago, you published the Azure Monitor for SAP Solutions video on our YouTube channel. And I think, or for me, the fascinating thing was that there was a lot of interest in this video. So in a lot of during a lot of channels, we got a lot of very positive feedback and questions, follow-up questions. So I'm super happy that you could join us now. And I actually don't want to say any more. So maybe I'll just hand it over to you. Maybe you can quickly introduce yourself, and then show us in more detail what the Azure Monitor for SAP Solutions is all about.
More than happy to, Holger. Yeah. First of all, thanks again for inviting me to this. I'm a big fan of the show. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Tobias Niekamp, as you already said. And I work in a engineering organization at Microsoft called Azure Dedicated. Basically, mission critical workloads is what we build, and our team specifically is building the features into Azure that make Azure the cloud platform of choice for SAP workloads. That's kind of what we do. More specifically, I already tried to make already a little bit advertisement. I'm not a salesperson, but I made a little bit advertisement here for the automated deployment. So that's one big deal, one big topic in our team. And the other one, and I dare to say the biggest release after Microsoft Flight Simulator probably these days.
We didn't talk about that. Yeah.
Well, you know, if we have some time, we can still do it. Is the product Azure Monitor for SAP Solutions. It's kind of a tongue twister, so people tend to abbreviate it AMS. You called it SAP Monitor, that's fine as well. The idea is the same. It's essentially a Azure native monitoring framework targeted towards SAP workloads, right? So if I decide to move my SAP footprint into the cloud, we from Azure want to ensure that, you know, SAP is an inherently complex system. So we want to ensure that that migration is a smooth one, and that you don't have to ramp up on all kinds of new tools you have to install. You may not have 30 years of cloud knowledge as you have SAP basis knowledge, right? So we want to make it easier for customers to monitor their SAP landscapes, particularly from a cloud infrastructure angle. That's kind of the gist. And yeah, that's what I have in store for you today.
Cool.
We can actually take a look at the solution itself if you're interested. So let me just share my screen. And for the folks who watched me in the YouTube video that you advertised, yeah, I hope you learned something new, because we're going to dive a little bit deeper. And I also want to talk a little bit more about the architecture behind it, as well as what's on the roadmap. All right. So let me share this.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so the important thing to note is that the features that we built, such as Azure Monitor for SAP, they are resources, Azure resources, or ARM resources, as we call them, in their own right. So this is not a loose collection of scripts that you somewhere install, but it's an actual resource that you can deploy directly from Azure Portal, or through, CLI, PowerShell if you want. Also possible, but the easiest way is, of course, to go through Azure Portal. And I quickly want to show you how the whole thing works. So for that purpose, I built up a scale-out system, actually using the automated deployment templates that we have.
Just gonna ask. Yeah.
Yep. I hate doing manual tasks, so the deployment script sets up the whole thing, including jump boxes that have HANA Studio installed on top of them. Makes it actually really easy. It's actually an HSR-based setup, right? So you see the nodes go from 1 through 4, and there's 2 sides, A and B. More about that we'll see when we look into the monitor. But the cool thing is the whole setup is, it's really just a click of a button, or it's actually hitting a key in that case. Those scripts are based on top of Terraform and Ansible. So it's infrastructure as code, and it makes deploying this super simple.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just wanted to show you this. For the sake of this example, just want to quickly show you how you would deploy an Azure Monitor for SAP Solutions. So you can do that by clicking create a resource that takes you into the Azure Marketplace. So in here we can search. It is okay. As you're familiar with any gallery marketplace packages, you see this one here, description, click on create, and then you get some sort of wizard that takes you through the deployment of the what we call SAP Monitor resource. So I'll pause here for 1 second. Just conceptually, it's important to understand that there are really 2 types of resources involved as we build up an Azure Monitor for SAP Solutions. There is what we call a SAP Monitor resource, which is just the framework, which is what you deploy here. And then inside that monitor, you would add providers, which are basically connectors to your source systems. So you could essentially have one single SAP Monitor resource, and you can connect multiple providers either to several HANA databases, or you could add a SQL Server database or an HA cluster, whatever provider we offer you. And we're actually actively building more providers so that we can collect application telemetry as well, and support further databases, any DB databases that are not HANA. Okay, so how would I go about
just a quick question. So basically, sure. I would deploy the Azure Monitor then in my Azure subscription, and then if I have, I don't know, 5 or 10 other SAP landscapes that are distributed across different resource groups that I've installed there, then I could use these providers to connect these SAP systems, to connect the HANA databases, and as you said, more and more of these providers will come, so that in this one centralized Azure Monitor, I would get all the telemetry data from all the systems that I have running in my Azure subscription.
That's exactly right. The only physical boundary that we have is the region. So essentially, and I will show you this right now as we're doing this. Essentially, each SAP Monitor resource is bound to a VNet, and the VNet can already exist, or I can create a new one. Let's call this submon, and I'll call it podcast. I have to select a region. Let's use West Europe, because we are in West Europe right now. It will show me which VNets I currently have. So this is actually from a different landscape. Yeah, let's go with this one here. This is the VNet into which my automated deployment scripts have deployed a HANA installation into. I would select a subnet. And this can be an existing subnet. I mean, the subnet is just a logical boundary, so it doesn't really matter. I could create a new monitoring subnet into this VNet if I wanted to. And although it's technically possible to have a VNet that spans or that contains resources from several regions, you could use, I think it's called global peering. We would generally not advise that. First of all, it gets more expensive to do that, and also you add more latency. Now, an important thing to note is that we leverage, and this is already in the name, we leverage certain resources from Azure Monitor framework, including log analytics. So if you're not familiar with what that is, I'll show you in just a second. And while we normally deploy or we create a new log analytics workspace for you, where all the telemetry goes into, you could, if you wanted to, use an existing log analytics workspace as well. That's an option if you already use log analytics. You don't have to create a new log analytics workspace. Either way will be fine.
So if I'm already a huge user of log analytics and I monitor already all my virtual machines and stuff like that, and now I also want to get the SAP telemetry data, then I would just say, well, use the existing one, and then I would still get all the information in one place.
That's exactly right. I mean, one of the reasons why we built this particular product here, Azure Monitor for SAP Solutions, was to enable monitoring for SAP landscapes regardless of the underlying infrastructure. So what I mean by that is, yes, you may already use Azure Monitor if you have a VM-based landscape, okay? But if you opted for bare metal and you have those really beefy 24 terabyte blades, right? Up until now, there was really not much in terms of monitoring that you could do that was integrated with Azure, right? So we're bridging that gap here and allow you to monitor your SAP landscape on Azure, even if it's based on bare metal. Or you could have, an SAP Monitor resource that mixes VM and bare metal resources. The boundaries they are blurred with this tool. One note on this thing here, I know it can be intimidating when you try to deploy something and you already get 20 questions, but we're trying to make it as easy as possible, and I will talk a little bit about the blocks and the documentation we have for this. We offer customers a feature that enables the sharing with the telemetry with Microsoft. Now, why would you do that, right? I mean, on my iPhone, I'm always the one who, disables sharing the data with Apple. So why would I want Microsoft to get the telemetry from my SAP landscape? It enables us from Microsoft side, when there are issues with your landscape, to diagnose faster, because we're not relying on a screen share session with you or something, or for you to open the ticket with SAP, for example, but we can directly see telemetry like utilization of your HANA database, as an example, right? Or in terms of if you have an HA cluster set up using Pacemaker, if the CRM, the tool that monitors the cluster, is reporting a healthy status, right? So that will make things a lot easier. So I will select yes here.
And you're stating here that we're not collecting any PII data. So
that's right. Yeah. So we're not, collecting things like the, I don't know, the top 10 employees that make the most money in your company or things like that, right? So it's merely anonymous or non-PII utilization data. In the documentation, there's actually a list of all the key figures that are being collected. Yeah. So after we've done that, these are all the properties for an SAP Monitor resource. Not too bad. We talked quite a bit. Normally, this can be done in 30 seconds, but it's not too complex, I think. Then the next step would be you can add the providers here, or you can do that once the SAP Monitor resource has been created. Either way is fine. Usually, we recommend, especially if you deploy an SAP Monitor for the very first time, that you just deploy it and then add the providers later. That makes the troubleshooting a little bit easier. If you're not sure that your user has the right permissions and that everything is set up properly in Azure, but you could go in here and add a provider or multiple providers if you wanted to. The way this works is you select the type. Currently, we support these three guys here. SAP-HANA, a high availability cluster that is based on top of Pacemaker, or Microsoft SQL Server. That is the actual on-prem or in the cloud installation, not the SQL Server Cloud Edition that runs inside Azure. So you could say, I want to do SAP-HANA. You would give the provider a name. So we can name this provider HANA1. You would select an IP address. Now, this could also be a host name if you wanted to. Some customers, they use external host names or have a different way to resolve host names. So typically, the IP address is more likely to work without problems. In my case, I know this one by heart, 10.0.0.6. And I will say something about what to fill in here in just a second. You want to use typically the systemdb tenant. If you use a MDC enabled HANA database, which I think are probably 95 or higher % of all HANA databases now. I don't think we see a lot of single database container based HANA installations anymore. And the reason why you want to connect that against the systemdb is that certain metrics, like for backup or HSR, HANA system replication, are only available in the systemdb tenant. You could later on still add specific database tenants if you so desired. You would put a port. So this is typically 3, then the instance number, and then 13. You need a username and password. And in the documentation that I'm going to show you in 1 second, we actually tell you which roles are required, how you set up those users. Just for the sake of making this easy, I will just use the system account. Don't do that with your production system. Now, the one thing I want to call out, which I think is kind of cool, and this was driven by specific customer feedback we got. While we allow you to enter your password here, and we will store it in your key vault, so we don't even have access to this. But if you want to go extra safe, and maybe you don't even know the password either, and it's a different team, your information security team, your InfoSec team, that has access to those passwords only, you could put the password in advance into a key vault and have that maintained by your InfoSec team, and just give us the link to that key vault. So if you do that, right, you click there, it opens a new blade here, and yeah, you would be able to select,
yeah.
I'm not sure I have access to this one, but.
Oh, but nice. So really, like you said, someone else could actually maintain the credentials in the Key Vault, and then the one who actually connects to Azure Monitor would not even know the password.
That's correct. Yep, that's exactly right. And then I would say add provider. You see the providers added here. I could add more providers if I wanted to. For the time being, I will not do that. I can assign tags for the purpose of billing. We'll leave that blank as well. Here's the review screen. You click on review and create, and there it goes. Nice. Takes a moment, and yeah, we will take a look at it. But how it always is in those cooking shows, I've actually prepared, something in the oven. I'll close this one here. So this is how it would look like after a few minutes when the deployment is done. This is a SAP Monitor resource that I've created. I called it all because it requires, or it contains multiple SAP resources that you would normally find. SAP-HANA, we have a SQL Server in there, and we have an HA cluster. So you see that this one is also part of a specific VNet. And in that VNet, you can actually go into this one. You will see I've actually peered multiple VNets from different HANA installations, different SQL Server installations. And that allows me to have access to all of these. So you see there's a SID called RU1, which we looked at earlier. There's one for the HA cluster. Yeah, that actually allows me to connect to all of those and to collect telemetry from it. But before I show you how that works in more detail, quickly want to show you what you get with it. There's an overview of the architecture, and this actually links directly into the official documentation page. And I think now is a good time to briefly talk about that. So when you deploy a SAP Monitor resource, you will find that you end up with a what we call managed resource group that has a bunch of resources in it. They all run in your own subscription, so Microsoft doesn't have any access to it. And they contain things like, most prominently, a collector VM. It's a very small size burst, so it's a V1S size VM that will connect to your different systems for which you configure the providers, SAP-HANA or SQL Server, Pacemaker. It will collect those metrics and it will send them to a log analytics workspace. That's the workspace that we configured when we set up the SAP Monitor. Important to note that all credentials that you provide, they reside in a Key Vault that is also part of that managed resource group, and everything is in your subscription. So nothing leaves, no credentials leave your own subscription boundary. Nothing gets to Microsoft in this case. Okay, we also have a more detailed description on the different providers. So if you go on that page, it tells you a little bit about all the providers that currently exist: SAP-HANA, the HA High Availability Cluster, or SQL Server. And if that is not enough, there is also a quick start, which we will expand in the future for the different provider types. Now, one thing I want to quickly point out, this is a fairly new product. We're just in public preview for a month now. Yeah, it's been a little bit over 4 weeks. So very, very happy and very thankful for the great feedback we got from our first customers already. We're of course improving, the documentation. We're trying to see what is difficult for customers. So I quickly wrote up a short blog, and we can link this in the description of this podcast. Setting up SAP-HANA on Azure, the monitoring for it, but how, right? So I already mentioned there's a bunch of different hoops you have to jump through. Which port is my database running on, for example? Yeah, or which user do I set up, right? So in this blog, I'm trying to fill the gaps until we catch up with the official documentation, so we can, link to that. And yeah, this gives a little bit more detail on why things are built a certain way and what's the easiest way to add your HANA database to your new SAP Monitor resource.
Right.
Okay. Now, without further ado, so what do I actually get from this? Why did we, for the last 20 minutes, talk about this? Now, the really interesting thing is I've set up all these providers here. So you see there's two HANA databases. There is a pacemaker cluster, and we get a SQL Server as well. We find connection strings and some metadata information. And what I can do now is I can, without using any SAP proprietary or third-party tools, get telemetry from the different landscapes that I'm monitoring. So, for example, this was the RU1 landscape that we built up with the automated deployment script. You find it has 4 nodes. I connected this to the primary side, by the way, so yeah, you can see what kind of services are currently running. Here the index server is stopped. This is the standby node, I should add, right? And then we can take a look at utilization metrics, CPU, memory, disk for data and log. As you see, there's not too much going on because it's just an empty landscape. But this sure looks different on our customers' installations, where they run larger scale-out systems. We can actually get into more detail for utilization. So if I find a spike here, for example, I don't know if you see one here. We can go back 30 days. I'm sure if we find something, yeah, you see it's been fairly quiet here. It has a time brush feature that you may already know from HANA Cockpit. So we borrowed the idea from there. Shout out to my former colleagues at SAP. You can actually select a time frame that you're interested in, and it will zoom in automatically here at the bottom. So this makes troubleshooting or root cause analysis a lot easier. You see a spike here, you can directly zoom in, filter out the node that you're interested, and start your analysis from there. We do also get backup metrics. This is one of the reasons why I said you should use the systemdb tenant rather than your individual database tenants. And I could see, for my, I don't know if we have any full backups in this one. Let's see. I think we only got the log backups here because it never triggered. Here's one actually.
That's a complete backup, yeah. Yeah,
so it tells me actually when was the last full backup taken, right? The log backups, I'll go back a little bit less. So they run, I think, every 15 minutes. So I can also take a look, how this stacks up, right? And if I visually spot any irregularities here, I could also filter by the only the failed backups if I'm interested in that. I'm not sure if we have any in this specific case. No, there are none right now. But all of this is possible for a cloud admin who may not even have access to the SAP proprietary tools, HANA Studio or HANA Cockpit, right? So as the boundaries between the different roles get more blurry, this is another entry point that shows you the telemetry more from an infrastructure perspective. The last thing, sorry, do you have a question?
Yeah, just wanted to. So now that all this information is available in Azure, I guess I could also then, for example, create some alert rules or connect this with logic apps and do some workflows around this and stuff like that.
So I'll just park or table that question for 1 minute. But yeah, you bring up actually a very good point, because this is kind of what we do currently with the raw data that gets ingested, and I will show you that as well. We built some simple visualization on top of it. Actually, this one's kind of cool. Just shows you actually the current replication status of my HSR landscape. So I see, okay, it's replicating here from site A to site B. Currently, it's active. It's async with log replay, and it even shows me, okay, there's not too many irregularities as well, but it even shows me the latency, or the latency between the different sites and the sizes of the log buffer that I have. So this there's not too much going on in this landscape, like I said, but in larger landscapes this is quite valuable. And as we are constantly improving the product, we're actually leveraging the predictive functionality that Azure provides and that Azure Monitor provides to make forecasts in terms of how your system will scale, for example. Okay. Just before I move on to the other providers, I quickly want to show you what happens with the raw data. So as you see, there's a link here in my SAP Monitor resource to the Log Analytics Workspace that stores the underlying raw data. All of the data is stored in custom logs. So you find that for HANA, for example, the individual metrics are stored in these tables or custom logs that are prefixed with SAP-HANA _, right? So you see, for example, the load history, which is really just your system views, the way you know them from HANA. I'll make this a little bit larger here. You see we're getting the data from the HANA name server or from the statistics server merely. Things like the memory allocation limit, the resident memory, the actual memory size. They are all emitted here. So to answer your question, yes, I could absolutely build my custom alerts using log analytics. So this is a feature we have on the roadmap to pre-deliver certain alerts with the solution. We're just not there yet because we're still, working on the foundation there. But for the time being, you could just create a new alert and say, okay, if my CPU is at 100% for a prolonged time, or if the disk utilization for my data volume is larger than, 70%, then send me an alert, right? This is absolutely possible, and there are a ton of opportunities as you integrate this with existing IT SM tools, right? If you're using ticketing systems, ServiceNow or the like, you could totally integrate with those.
Right. Yeah.
We're not limited to HANA, as I already mentioned. We have quite rich metrics for other databases like SQL Server as well. You see this is not a overly busy database either, but it captures interesting information like what are my top 10 weight statistics. This is a question that always comes from customers. What are my top 10 statements? Have there been any actual issues occurring in the last 30 minutes or whatever time frame I select here? And it even provides some more details on always on, if you have always on configured in that SQL Server instance. So you see actually a similar visualization
like what we saw in HANA.
The one that we had with HANA HSR. You have the same thing here with SQL Server always on. Yep, and last but not least, we are also investing in the actual infrastructure tool. So we built this together with the colleagues from SUSE. So shout out to our friends from Nuremberg or wherever they are based. This is a high availability cluster that we have running on one of the systems. SID was HA4. That one uses Pacemaker as per our official Microsoft document how to set it up. And whoops, I'm playing around here with that beehive thing. That's kind of cool. Funky stuff. Yep. Let me scroll down. Okay. So as I select the cluster, a little bit more readable, I get essentially the same information that otherwise I would get displayed only by logging onto the server, onto the Linux shell there, and running CRM, which is one of the custom managers for Pacemaker. So I get all of these metrics directly displayed here.
That's actually something that I extremely like, because for me, Pacemaker is always this black hole. I mean, I know we have some beautiful tools that help you to automate the setup and stuff like that, but then Pacemaker is always, well, I hope it's running and there are some data is coming out, but let's don't touch it. But with this, we expose some of the monitoring data in a beautiful way. So that's why I really love the Pacemaker component of the SAP Monitor here.
It provides a lot more insight, right? So, I mean, oftentimes I may not have direct access, depending on my role in the company, to the Linux cluster, and that it requires elevated access. You know, so the ability to just pull telemetry from that cluster is actually quite valuable, according to our customers. So the one thing I just did, I actually just broke the landscape. I did that on purpose. And I actually just shut down one of the nodes inside our Pacemaker cluster, right? So I just stopped that VM. It was a single node cluster that is, or actually a 2-node cluster, single node in the lingo of HANA, but yeah, it's really 2 nodes. Because you have 2 sides, and eventually this may take a moment, and we can come back later if it hasn't already picked it up. As I open this here, it has already picked up. Okay, there's an issue now. This thing is yellow.
Shut down.
Yeah, because the member HDB 1-1, which was the second node of this cluster that I just stopped, is now in status shutdown. Right, so it picks it up fairly quickly. It's not. You see here, it's in stopping stage. It's not real time because there is a certain amount of latency required for us to pick it up. We don't query it every second because we don't want to overload the system either. And also we have to send the data over the network into log analytics. But you saw, I mean, just from this demo, it was fairly fast. Now the last thing I want to quickly show you is, from an architecture perspective, the way we built it. We actually built it open source as far as the payload is concerned. And this may be, you know, a new, maybe a shocker for many customers. What is Microsoft doing, right? Are they insane? Well, you be the judge. So here, this thing that you see here is our GitHub repo that contains the source code for the we call collector that runs on your VM that connects to the different source systems as you configure the providers. And the nice thing about our design here is that all providers, they're sort of it's like a Lego type of system, where you have individual components. So we have different providers that are defining the logic on how to connect to different systems, like how to connect to HANA, how to connect to SQL Server, for example. And then the content can easily be defined. So just picking the HANA provider as an example, as you see here, this is actually how we are querying HANA to get, for example, the load history. Yeah, this one is a little bit more complex, but all of this shows you the content that is used to power our framework. In this case, is just based on SQL statements.
But that's really cool. I mean, thinking back of the very first thing where you had, well, what data is actually collected. Here you can see it. It's really in GitHub, everyone accessible to everyone. If you really want to drill down and take a look, how are we doing this? Well, it's written here.
And I guess and we actually encourage contributions from the community. So if you have an idea for a cool provider, something that you want to have collected in terms of telemetry, just send us a pull request. We'll review it, and it will go directly into this product.
So that's really cool. If I'm a customer and I have now, I think, well, this is really missing, then they don't need to reach out to you directly, or they don't need to find someone to contact. They could just create a pull request, and you are monitoring this, obviously, and then you would work on this and potentially implement it.
That's right. And I mean, of course, we do welcome any suggestions, right? So you don't, as a customer, you don't have to write your own provider at all, right? Sure. That's not the message I wanted to convey. You can simply tell us, hey, we would like to start doing more application metrics. Yeah, give us some NetWeaver application metrics that we can integrate into log analytics. We'll look into it, and we'll build the pertinent content, so it will be rolled out in one of the future versions.
Cool.
Yeah. So this was pretty much all I had in store for today. I hope it was not too much, not too overbearing. If you guys have any questions, by all means, feel free to reach out. We're a relatively small team, so we're very agile. I think that's the positive spin of it, and we can easily answer to feedback from the community. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much, Tobias. I think that was really insightful. I mean, we talked a little longer than originally planned, but I think for me it was extremely educational. It was really good, and I think you mentioned a few very interesting things. You also highlighted some URLs, so we'll make sure to post them also in the video. Again, this is in public preview. If someone has ideas, just create an issue or go to the Git repo and create a pull request, whatever you feel comfortable.
That's right.
And then let's see. I mean, I think what we have already is really good, so you can already get started. I think we already do have some customers that are really using it.
That's right. Yeah. We have customers that are using it in production landscapes even. This is actually one thing, thank you for reminding me, I would mention. It makes sense, just as you split your dev system from your QA or production system, you may want to set up one sub-monitor per tier, right? So you don't want to have one single sub-monitor and you mix all kinds of system in there. It probably makes more sense to have one sub-monitor for your dev, for your QA, for your staging, whatever tiers you have, right? So you have that boundary reflected in the setup of the sub-monitor as well.
Cool.
Awesome.
Great. Again, Tobias, thank you very much.
Thank you, Olga. Yeah.
I think with this we can close off this very first session with you. I hope this was not the last one, so I hope to see you again. Yeah. Maybe next time also more on the automation topics or something else. Let's see. Again, thank you very much. We'll see each other again next week, or we'll have another podcast at least next week, hopefully then with Robert and Goran again. And yeah, thank you very much for joining. Thank you.
Thanks again. Yep. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.